So here we are, date 3. We know this is exactly why you signed up for a course like this. You wanted, you imagined sitting in intimate space with your partner and listening to your pastor and his wife talk about sex.
Yep, that's why you're here. We have been in a lot of groups where this is one of the topics of discussion. In marriage courses, it's always one of the units, right? You always have to talk about sex because sex is a part of marriage, right? Like it's just something we have to talk about. And it has been fun to watch over the years the different reactions to this conversation because there's, those outliers that are like, yes, I love talking about sex with other people, and it's a little awkward with the rest of the group, but it's also at the same time wonderful for someone to actually be open and honest about marital sex. And then there was the other group that we led where no one in the group could say that 3-letter word. They could not say it among other adults. And so we had to refer to sex with the word hat in order to engage any kind of conversation. And that was just as awkward.
10 times more awkward, I think.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we'd really like to do is just to normalize the conversations about sex, because honestly, most sex happens in married relationships or long-term relationships. But Hollywood does not present sex that way, and even when we talk about sex in other settings, we don't talk about it. It's just normal married people sex. And when we do, we have that kind of like, married people sex. It's not that dramatic Hollywood style.
Yeah. So normal, everyday part of committed relationship, right? And it's not as though the Bible's silent about these things or ambivalent about sex. Even Paul brings it up in his letter to the Corinthians. He writes, "The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. And the wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. And so do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent for a time, so that you will devote yourselves to prayer, and then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control."
That's a really clinical way to talk about sex. I mean, just that contractual obligation.
For sure, yeah. But I suppose underneath all of that, Paul has in mind to keep people out of the weeds of temptation and keep things on a healthy spiritual track. And so he's laying it out in those kind of terms. But there's really beauty behind that, and certainly there's other parts of the Bible where we've got a whole book of the Bible that's devoted to talking poetically and explicitly about sexual intimacy and parallels that with an intimate relationship with God. And so you hear things in Song of Songs like, "My beloved is mine and I am his. And how beautiful you are and how pleasing, my love, with all your delights."
Yeah, that's super awkward when you're reading the Song of Songs with, let's say, your grandparents or something.
And there's so much more. If you haven't taken a trip through Song of Songs, make that a part of your date, okay? So anyways, with all of this, it's not only about physical sex, but it's about intimacy and emotional connection with one another and opening up that kind of space. And so for that, we have definitely found that the 5 love languages is just a really helpful tool for just helping you to connect and understand each other emotionally, and to kind of do a little bit of a pulse check on how you're doing in your relationship, and keep things focused on that affection and appreciation in the language that means the most to them. And so the thing is, we have a checkpoint every once in a while where it's just basic thing like, are you feeling loved lately? And tell me more about that.
Yep. That's a really helpful, simple thing to do, to just reconnect on the intimate level. And the bottom line is, great sex is not rocket science. It's very doable, but you have to be willing to talk about it. And you have to make it a priority in your relationship.
Totally.
Both to talk about it and to do it. I don't want that part in the video.
So this date is all about exploring and discussing romance and sex and physical intimacy. And so we want to just invite you to really lean in and use the open-ended questions in order to open up helpful conversation about what you like and don't.
And remember to laugh along the way. Have some fun with this conversation. It's not every day that your pastor tells you to go talk about sex with your spouse. So don't view it as a chore or an obligation. It doesn't have to be super serious. Like, it can just be a fun conversation with your spouse tonight.
This is just everyday part of a committed relationship. So again, we got the theme verse for marriage in the Bible in week 1, in date 1, from Genesis 2:24. That's why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. And then it goes on in verse 25 to say Adam and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame. So certainly when we're talking about this nakedness in the Bible, there's multiple dimensions to that. Not just physical nakedness, but emotional nakedness. That actually you're just completely open with who you are and you're comfortable in your own skin. You have no shame. You have nothing to hide. With this other person is the safest place there is to be in the whole world. And so you know that you're protected with their love. And so this date, really, you want to land the plane by just recommitting to actual intimacy in your relationship and finding out what's most meaningful that you share between the two of you.
Yeah. And I will say, if you have signed up for the small group, this is the week you might be tempted to skip your Zoom call.
Totally.
Don't do it. Like, just commit as well to joining that Zoom call. This is normal stuff. We can talk about it. You can talk about it.
Let's make sex and intimacy something that we can talk about among friends. It's normal.
Yep.
It's a really good gift from God. So, all right. Peace, everybody.
Peace.